Do you love Vanguard but keep losing every game you play? Would guaranteeing a 6 damage heal help you beat everyone in your local area? Well, good news, because here at Miracle Trigger we're trying to guarantee that everyone can hit their own Miracle Trigger. And with the In Love with the Coco shirt, I can almost guarantee a 12% raise in your chance at healing at 6 damage. But maybe you don't need your extra help winning your games. Well, good news, because as everyone knows, Coco's the best card in the game, and it helps to support this channel. So if you need help winning games, you want to help out this channel, or you just want a shirt, then you should check out the link in the description. What's going on, guys? This is Miracle Trigger, and today we're going to be talking about a quick update to my tier list going into the Toronto Regionals, which should be this weekend. That being said, I will be there, so if you guys see me, be sure to come say hi. We could probably get a game in. I played a couple people when I went to Toronto, or when I went to Chicago a little while ago. But yeah, so we've had a couple new sets come out, and because of that, some decks have moved up, some decks have moved down. I just want to kind of give a feel for where everything is so far. That being said, if you see a clan that you like in a lower tier than you think, I think this is just in relation to how it deals with other clans. I'm not saying it can't win games or it can't do well, I'm just saying it has a harder time doing so. So if you're doing well with it, maybe you're just better than the average player for that deck. So congrats. On that note though, I do want to remind everyone I am going to be giving away a free box for the Bermuda Triangle Extra Booster that's coming out on the 17th. So if you're interested in doing that, leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment on this video. You can join the Discord, which is down in the description down below, or you can become a Patreon for extra entries. Being said, I'm also going to be selling a shirt, and the image should be on screen now. I'll be doing an extra giveaway for those who buy this shirt, and one lucky purchaser will get a free box as well. And of course, the link for that will be in the description down below as well. With all that being said though, let's get into the actual tier list. At the bottom, you've probably noticed I have a couple indicators on many of the clans. So high roll decks basically have a win mechanic where sometimes they hit it and there's nothing really the opponent can do. So for example, Golden Beast Tamer can have like 8 or 9 attacks, and if your opponent doesn't hit a defensive, that's it. Sometimes they just lose. Or Aquaforce, same deal. Waterfall, sometimes they just don't have grade 0s in their hand, and that's the end of the game. You know, stuff like that. They can definitely win on their own a lot of the times, but they do have a mechanic where sometimes they just win. Consistent decks, just that. They have a lot of mechanics to make sure that they get what they need efficiently and on a consistent manner. Sleeper decks are things that you probably don't consider to be very good, but have a chance to really screw you over if you're not paying attention to them. And finally, the honestly why though category. These are clans that I don't get why you're picking them. There are just better options to do what they do in many other clans. Just because it's your favorite deck doesn't mean it's the most efficient way to do what you're doing. So yeah, if you're playing Nova Grapplers, you might as well be playing Pale Moon. It's a very similar mechanic, and you're just going to have a better time about it. Anyways, starting off with Tier 5. This tier, anyways, is in no particular order. So we're going to start off with both of the Aquaforce decks being Maelstrom and Navel Gazer. Like I said, these clans are just shut down by defensive triggers. They have a pretty difficult time sometimes getting over force. They're very susceptible for removal, which is now in things like Shadow Paladin, Great Nature, Delitos, Royal Paladin, Narugami, Kagero. Even Dark Irregulars has some removal, like it's everywhere, and it just shuts the clan down. And the strongest deck in the format right now, Shiryuki, can make 3 of your rows lose 10k pretty regularly, so you just get shut down by that as well. These two decks just aren't very functional. These two decks just aren't very functional in the current meta. Next up we have Gigarex Tachikazes. Very much the same. The gauge system is fun to play with, but a lot can go wrong. You can basically gauge your important units. Think of it as DI on multiple units. The combo potential's there, it just doesn't have a really effective finisher, and that's what's holding that clan back in the biggest way. Artemis build, if you're playing that, just play Himiko. There's no reason to play Artemis, I don't think. Same with Schwarzschild, play the other build. It's just, like, it's fun, but eh. Azura Kaiser, same thing, you should be playing Pale Moon, multiple attacks are just done much more effectively there, and there's no real reason to limit yourself in this way. Nova Grapplers is just very weak until the next set of support comes out. And Grand Blue is garbage. Like it's bad. Don't play it. Onto tier 4 though, we are going to be starting things off with Mandala Lord in the bottom spot. So Mandala Lord is a very high roll deck. If you hit all the units on your field, you hit a front trigger, it just wins. Like, it's really effective. It can run Shiryuki, which is great, but it runs out of steam very quickly. A lot of the cards that have the Mandala tag don't give you much value and let you stay in the game very long, so you burn out pretty quickly. If you're not rewriting Mandala Lord, you can fall behind pretty quickly, and just things don't go very well for that deck a lot of the time. But, like I said, it can high roll, sometimes you just win. Spike Brothers, very much the same. They have these massive numbers that can just steamroll over opponents very easily. The biggest issue with this deck is that it just has big numbers. There's not a whole lot else that it offers. Like, the big numbers are great on their own, but without having big numbers and something, it just falls apart. So for example, Shadow Paladin. They have very big numbers, same as this. However, they also have searching, draw advantage, removal, extra criticals, like all these extra things on top of that those big numbers, and it just makes a big difference. Next up we have Soul Saver, kind of the same deal. On top of that, the other Royal Paladin deck is just more consistent with Monarch and Exculpate, and like the big numbers are nice, again, but it's just big numbers, and a lot of Protect clans will just shut you out without even thinking about it. Garmor build, really fun. It's super fast, super in their face, and very easy to snowball, but if you don't snowball, things go very, very, very poorly for you. Both of the Nubatama decks being Kujikiri Kongo and Magatsu Storm, they're fine. The discard can be really effective sometimes. I should probably have the high roll on that, but it's whatever. But it's kind of eh. Making your opponent discard 5 to 14 cards can go pretty far. Negating an opponent's Vanguard attack, it's pretty good. They both offer these really niche, unique things, but they have so many plot holes all over the clan. There's no real way to get draw advantage in it. There's no real way to get many pluses out of it, and you run out of steam pretty quickly in both builds. There's just a lot that can go wrong. Speaking of a lot that can go wrong, we have End of Stage Dragon. We just watched this card's price drop like $20 over 2 weeks, and that's because the deck just isn't all there. Can high roll. Sometimes, you know, negating Sentinel effects, very good. Standing Vanguard, very good. But you lose so much doing it. Your entire field gets eaten, and yeah, you can use the Chimeras and all that and pull them out. That's fine. But, like, it's a lot of resources on top of that. You lose all your Interceptors, you have to put 2 cards from hand into soul, so you go basically even. You're praying that your drive checks will be extra. It just falls apart very easily. And it takes, in my opinion, all the shortcomings of Golden Beast Tamer are just made worse in this version. So, I don't know, I would just run Beast Tamer in my opinion. On to tier 3, we are going to be starting out with Mega Colony. This is not a great deck, but it has the potential to lock your opponents out. Being able to stun their units, having these big numbers on their own, a lot of draw advantage, a lot of pressure in their rear guards, as well as having the Antlion combo, this clan can just win. Sometimes they just don't have the cards to guard when you have Antlion's ability go off. Sometimes your Vanguard is just so massive it works. You can call things out with Stag Beetle. There's just all these different little facets that this deck does really well, and they all come together to make the deck actually pretty good. It just sometimes doesn't keep up against other clans. That being said, especially with Link Joker being as popular as it is, this clan is able to ride continuously, and it has a lot of grade 3 searchers, which makes Link Joker suffer a little bit. So it's definitely something to consider when you're playing this clan or when you're thinking about bringing it. Speaking of riding a bunch of grade 3s, we have Dimension Police. This is probably one of the more fun high roll decks, because you can push your opponent from 2 or even 1 damage to 6 just out of nowhere. The deck has a lot of criticals, these massive numbers on Vanguard. You ride a card from your hand after you attack, which is huge, while giving your field a buff. It's a lot of really cool effects, and the high roll on it is just massive. And similarly, we have Waterfall and Transcendence. These are essentially the same deck. The deck is a little bit diluted when you use the Transcendence build, so I put it a little bit lower. But overall, your plan is to just keep riding Waterfall over and over again, and your opponent eventually won't have cards to guard his ability. So it's pretty good. In the Transcendence version, I know it's a little bit weaker, but I kind of like it a bit more, because when you run out of Waterfalls, you can hop onto Transcendence, nuke their entire board, and you kind of have a couple extra options there, which is pretty fun to play around with. So either way though, Guard Restrict is massive, attacking with crits is fantastic, it has retiring. It just suffers from the cards like Zanbaku, who stun your Vanguard from riding and really lock you into a bad position. So there's a lot that can go wrong in that deck. And on top of that, just not getting the grade 3s that you want and not having a really effective grade 3 searcher sucks. Like real bad. And the only effective draw that you have is like having Airmo and then retiring something. The next spot we have Dantarion Dark Irregulars, and this is with No Life King more often than not. Guarding from your soul is pretty cool. You can retire opponent's rearguards to soul charge extra. You do a lot of effective things there. This is specifically the build without 5th element. So it has a lot of defensive abilities, it just doesn't have a great effect after that. Like, it just feels like the deck is missing something overall. It's pretty consistent because there's so much soul charging, you almost always have No Life King's ability go off, which is great, but that's it. I know a lot of people don't run 5th element for some reason, but I think the 5th element specific build is just so much stronger. The next deck we're taking a look at is Gear Chronicle. This is such a high roll deck. Only running 4 grade 4s. Only running 4 grade 4s kinda sucks and can screw you over pretty bad sometimes. However, when you get there, it's really, really cool. The ability to get an extra turn, and pretty easily, I've seen people do it as early as turn 4, blows people out of the water. There's not a whole lot they can do with it. There's light retiring in one of their grade 4s, you can get an extra critical, an extra drive check, calling things from the drop onto the field, superior calling from the deck, bind and draws pretty much everywhere, there's a ton of draw advantage. The deck really high rolls super effectively, and the only issue with it is that it can fall apart if you don't get any binding cards, and a lot of the time if that happens, you're probably going to deck yourself out. Next up we have the Coco deck, which is my personal favorite. It's what I'll be bringing tomorrow It's what I'll be bringing to Toronto this weekend, so I should be in spot A, so if you want to play against me, maybe set yourself up there. Anyways, Coco is a sleeper deck. There's tons of draw advantage, you get extra sentinels. Your biggest problem is things that have guard restrict, like Waterfall and End of Stage, stuff like that. Even Great Nature can kind of be a problem because it's an aggro deck, which is great against Protect in general, and it can get guard restrict off of Monoculus. With all that being said though, like, the deck's really effective. I went 9-0 with it last time, so like, it works, but it's very hard to play sometimes, and against aggro it can be a big issue. But a lot of the higher tier decks aren't very aggro, so that's good. Following Coco, we have the Pentagonal list. This is a much more popular one, and it's just much more consistent overall, I think. There's a lot of scrying the top card of your deck, choosing if you want it top or bottom, and that enables you to get to the cards that you want more efficiently, more consistently, and just having 5 drive checks whenever you want is pretty big. And even if you're not using the ability, just having a 15k trigger check is really good, especially if some of your rearguards have an extra 5k on top of themselves. So, you know, 1 trigger boosts the rectangle to 29 with a booster that's 37. That's pretty good. Like, it's pretty good on its own. So yeah, the deck is just, in general, very strong. That being said, if you're going to play Pentagonal, you might as well just play Himiko. instead of getting 5 drive checks and praying for multiple triggers, Himiko guarantees you 3 triggers, and then you still get 2 drive checks. So that's pretty great on its own. It's a ton of pressure. You can, more often than not, I think you should start out with a draw trigger to get the extra draw advantage. But if you need to use a crit, like, cool. They don't have guard for it, you just won the game, congratulations. And in general, like, Genesis is pretty solid. And if all else fails, you have Melissa, mill them. Like, especially things like Great Nature or Murakumo, Soul Blast 3, they have to take the top 7 or 8 cards from their deck and put them onto the field. A lot of those decks run pretty dry as it is, and this can definitely push them over the edge. Note, next up in the tier 2 we have Fifth Element. This card can be insane. It's a pretty slow deck in general, however once you actually get to the Fifth Element turn, like, you win. I've had people push me from 0 to 6 damage in one turn, and it's just like, how do you respond to that? To protect clans, so you have enough ability to buy yourself that time, you can No Life King into this card, which means you essentially get 3 Vanguard attacks, and if you have Doreen on either side, those are massive, massive cards by the time this card attacks. So it's definitely a deck to watch out for. If you're not expecting it, it will run you over. Next up, we have Golden Beast Tamer Pale Moon. This deck is essentially the top tier high roll deck. You can get, like I said, 9 attacks in one turn, and if they don't hit a defensive, you win. It has this great ability to hide units away into its soul without them getting retired, like Alice or Chimera. It can get tons of superior calling with things like Purple Trapezist, again Alice, and there's like unflipping damage, there's multiple attacks. Your front row gets plus 3k, which means you can hit force numbers pretty easily. There's just a lot that goes really right with this deck. So if you have a 12k attacker on an Excel circle, you're still hitting a 13k Vanguard, even if they have a defensive, which is fantastic. There's a lot of extra pressure that this deck offers, and just at some point your opponent won't be able to guard it. So you will run out of steam, but until then you're probably going to do pretty well for yourself. Then we have Cecilia Neonectars. This is a clan built around summoning tokens. You almost never have to play cards from your hand, which is great for advantage. And on top of that, your force marker makes it so that those can hit your opponent. There's a lot of draw, there's a lot of big numbers, and there's a ton of superior calling, so you'll never really be out of resources, and the numbers are just constantly these almost unguardable things. If you're looking for just a big token rush deck, this is probably a good one for you to look at. Then we have Narugami with Detonit's Drill Dragon, Standing Vanguard, ability to bind opponents' rear guards, which is pretty great. You can attack their front row if you're running a Vermilion. You have a pseudo break ride. There's a lot of things that are going really, really well for this deck. There's a ton of pressure. Phoenix is a busted card. Just being able to guard with it, then summon it back to the field, or put it on an Excel circle. If they deal with it, cool, bring it back the next turn by binding one. It's like a never-ending supply of units. And on top of that, if all else fails, you have a Standing Vanguard that is terrifying to deal with. So, very powerful deck. One of the scariest aggro builds, I think, that someone can play. And it has these control elements that just allow you to play a control style while still rushing your opponent down, and it's super fun to deal with. Next up, we have my second favorite deck in the format, and that is Gust Blaster Dragon. So there's a Shadow Paladin, of course. They have the high roll potential of just critting your opponent from 2 damage and pushing them, to 12. You can pretty regularly deal 10 damage in one turn, which is very nice if you're paying attention to your opponent's drive checks. And it's very consistent. The amount of draw, superior calling, and retiring of your opponent's rear guards that you can do makes it so that you're in a very favorable position all the time, and you should be hitting all the cards that you need to almost every game. It's constantly reriding, so it kind of shuts down Link Joker, which is great. And if your opponent stuns you with Zanbaku, you can kind of prepare for that with being on Phantom Blaster Dragon and nuking their board when they do that. So there's a lot of really nice counterplay that this deck offers. There's a lot of consistency, there's a high roll potential. It's great. I would definitely consider bringing this deck if you have it available. The issue is it's expensive as shit. And we're finally on to the Tier 1 decks, and that's going to be starting off with Royal Paladin. The Exculpate nuke is just crazy strong. There's Monarch Alfred giving himself a crit. Kay and Bedivere are just these massive units that can call each other and always have a consistent board available to you. I'd basically say this and Shadows are pretty interchangeable with the big numbers and the general board control that they offer. So either one could be the bottom or top spot of Tier 1, Tier 2. So use them interchangeably on this list. But I think that the Royal Paladin version is a little bit better in dealing with the current meta, just because you can spread out those big numbers a lot easier than if you were to be playing Gust Blaster. Like, you don't feel as bad putting a 10k force marker on a Bedivere who's going to be swinging for 34, as opposed to putting a 10k force marker on a main that you called last turn and have it swing for 20, you know? So it's kind of up to you where you put those on this list, but they do have a very similar playstyle and a very similar theme in how you're going to be taking on most opponents. Next up is Deletors. This is a clan which a lot of people thought would be pretty bad, but it seems to be doing pretty well. It struggles against things that superior ride or that ride consecutively turn after turn, but even so, dropping your opponent's Vanguard down to 0 for a turn, like, that's a lot. That's adding, on average, 40k guard to their turn, let alone if you have Given on the field and can have a standing Vanguard who usually has a crit at this point. Like, there's a lot of pressure in this deck. If anything hits, most of it binds your units, which is a pain in the ass. The biggest fallback is that they can run out of steam a little bit, but so what? Like, by that point, your opponent's usually dead, so it's fine. Next up, we have a very popular deck, and again, one of these real expensive ones, and that is Raven-Haired Ezel. Superior riding to grade 3 while your opponent's on grade 1 can sometimes guarantee you the game, so that's pretty good. Having a guard restrict is fantastic. Being able to superior call units pretty much non-stop is also great. The biggest thing in this deck is that sometimes you just run out of resources, be it Counterblast or Soul Blast, or just hand advantage because you've rushed so hard. Overall, the deck is really fun to play. There's this consistency factor in having 2 different superior ride chains. A lot of things can go very right in this deck. It is probably one of the best high roll decks you can possibly bring right now. And from high roll, we're going to be talking about the most consistent deck that you can play, and that is Imperial Daughter OTT. So you have Imperial Daughter, gives herself a crit. You have cycling top card of your deck pretty regularly, pretty good. You can have the Deer, which is one of my most hated cards in the game, but, you know, it's a strong card all the same. A lot of things could go very right. You attack for big numbers, you constantly draw cards, a lot of protect gifts in this because you can re-ride, which is great against Link Joker. You get crit when your Vanguard attacks. You can have things like Rectangle Magus, Promised Daughter, the Deer, Tort. Like, all these things are definitely available to this deck, and they're a ton of pressure for your opponent to deal with. So this is, you know, still, since it came out, probably one of the best decks you can play. And I think the only better Protect clan than that is Metatron Angel Feathers. Being able to heal a damage, I hear that's pretty good. Being able to call units from your drop or from your damage, or add units from your damage to your hand, that's really good. Recycling cards into your deck is effective as hell. Getting an extra trigger check every turn because of Metatron's ability. Superior riding from the damage. Like, all these things really play around other clans very effectively. If they're rushing you, cool, you heal. If they're locking you, or if they're locking you with Zambaku, or they're deleting you, cool, ride a Vanguard from the drop zone. Like, there's so many different ways to get around other clans. This is an extremely effective deck, but it's so boring to play, and to play against. So, like, play it if you want, but God, everyone's gonna hate you. My favorite aggro deck for this meta is Great Nature. I think that is super powerful. It's a very consistent deck in general. However, it has this crazy high roll potential because of things like Leopold. There's cards in this clan which my teammate will be using that I don't think many people are, and it's just phenomenal. I'll do a deck check with him afterwards if that's something you guys want to see, because like I said, he did really well in Chicago too. He went like 7-2. But overall, this clan is always going to be insane. It has guard restrict, retiring, buffs. In some builds, you have a standing rearguard if you're playing Bison on your Vanguard. It has crits on Vanguard, superior calling, like just everything you could possibly want. It's extremely effective, very offensive, tons of draw advantage too. Like, this deck is great. And the only thing that's better than it right now is Shiryuki. So, fuck this card. Being able to neg your opponent 10k on 3 units is pretty good. Being able to neg your opponent 10k on 3 units on both turns, offensively or defensively, pretty good. You can stack it, so down 20k, or down 15 if it's your turn, by playing Vanguard and Rearguard. You can search this card because of the grade 2 or the grade 1. You can run it with Zanbaku, which was also a top tier deck, without actually interfering with the Zanbaku build at all, really. This deck does everything. Big numbers, mitigating your opponent's attacks. It's an Excel clan, so multiple attacks. There is essentially tutoring. There is like just everything that you could possibly want is in this deck, and it's such a bitch to deal with. Like, this is a very powerful deck. There's no question to it, and I think it's probably the strongest one of the format. But with all that being said, this is my general look at the tier list right now and the meta in general. Like I said, if you're going to be in Toronto, leave a comment and follow me on Twitter so that we can meet up and play a game or hang out, whatever. The tag on Twitter is @MiracleTrigger, pretty creative. If you want to enter that contest for the free Bermuda box, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, and join the Discord or become a Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. And if you want one of those shirts, picture should be on screen now. Of course, I'm going to be doing another giveaway for that Bermuda box for someone who buys them, so that's pretty good. And Coco's like the best card, so why wouldn't you want this shirt? With all that being said though, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video helps you guys, and I hope I can meet a couple of you in Toronto again, just like I did in Chicago. But I should probably start packing, so I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.